Tonight's story is, I recently left the cult I was raised in. Now I want back. I'm sure I was born in the temple. Recently, certain people have suggested that I wasn't. I should be inclined to believe them after everything that's happened. But if I wasn't born in the temple, well, I don't like to think of the alternatives. Hello, Reddit. I wish I could introduce myself, but I have no name. I spent my childhood, my formative years, nearly my entire life in a cult. It's left me with countless scars, physical and mental, and I now think it's time for me to tell my story. I've been trying to get my story out for a while now, but for some reason, I always ran into blocks. Transcriptions of mine were misplaced. My caregivers would accidentally cancel my meetings with journalists, things like that. I have decided that there will be no middleman. Just my thoughts and this computer. Much of my childhood is foggy. I remember the temple, of course. It was the building I called home for 19 years. You could spend hours wandering around the complex, series of long, metal corridors and tunnels, with each wall draped in red cloth and covered in the seals and symbols we were taught to respect. My main caregiver back then was Demiurge. From what I knew, Demiurge was my father. He was the father of all in the temple, one way or another. I never knew my mother. In fact, I didn't see a woman until just 1 year ago. You see, Demiurge was our teacher as well. We'd spend time meditating, 7 hours a day usually, and when we were in the classroom we would study symbology alone. Demiurge taught us that there was once an old world, a world where man could walk freely. There was grass and water and animals, as well as hair and war and death. The old world came to an end though, but we were a surviving pocket. With our work, we could one day purge the plains of the demons that now inhabit it. Until then, we kept to the walls of the temple and the sanctuary that came with it. Demiurge was a much smaller man than he acted. Looking back at it, I suppose he would have been in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. He had a chronic overbite of necrotic teeth and stunk of urine, but it never bothered me much. I suppose I was used to it. He wore a red and black robe, which set him aside from the rest of his children, who wore only white. Demiurge was such a paternal figure for me. He was there at every stage of my development, from my first words to my branding. Other than him, there were only ever 2 other seniors present to rear the flock. The first was Salman, who I never saw personally. I don't think any of the others did either. There was an ornate wooden booth nestled into the front right corner of the classroom. We'd regularly be made to sit around it and listen to Salman read stories from the Book of Seven. Our favorite stories were always the ones about Oz. Oz was the man, well, more than a man, who'd reclaim the world for us. He was a powerful warrior, one who could see through the perfect delusions of the demons and the saccharine sweet world they created. If I had the time, I could recite every detail of his life story to you. The main thing you should know is that he is the last one fighting for us. Once, in the blind foolishness of youth, I ran to the booth and peeked through the booth's canted slats. Emptiness. Just a tape recorder playing, its wires trailing into a hole in the floor. When I told Demiurge, he branded my tongue with a silver needle. Now you'll speak only truth. I vividly remember him repeating as he completed the ritual in his private chambers. For weeks, I tasted only blood and burnt meat. I suppose you could say Oz is our Jesus figure. if you want a Christian comparison, as so many of the people who first questioned me did. Aside from the symbols, the primary subject we studied was his life and his teachings. We were told that we'd one day join him, and it would be a great honor, the greatest honor. Only the branded few could, though. I think I mentioned it before, but while I'm here, allow me to explain further. When each of the children reached 14, we would get the mark of the septacle, with an iron metal rod bearing the symbol would be held in open flame, and with the rest of the flock watching, be seared into our skin, just above where your liver is. Apparently, they would wait until we reached 14 to test our commitment, our belief. Not that I've ever heard of someone being rejected. Much of our day-to-day involved mediation, often just by our cots or in the classroom, but on the special days marked by Oz, would spend hours in the meditation chambers. The meditation chambers were dimly lit, airless tombs where we knelt on grated floors until our knees split like overripe fruit. The vents above pumped in a sweet, cloying smoke that made the red tapestries ripple like living flesh. Some of the younger children wept silently, tears cutting through the grime on their cheeks. But discipline was absolute. I remember Caleb, or was it Jonah, collapsing during the third hour, his forehead striking metal with a wet crack. Demiurge didn't pause the chant. By the time the boy woke, his left pupil had bloomed scarlet from a burst vessel. A gift from Oz, I remember Demiurge whispering to the boy, pressing his thumb into the ruined eye. Now you'll see clearer. By 16, I was an adept symbologist. I knew everything from all of the major Old World cultures. Norse, Celtic, Choctaw, Hmong. They'd been drummed into me like a nursery rhyme. Most of the older children now spent their days practicing drawing these sigils until we reached perfect accuracy. I was always a leading student. I don't mind admitting it. And so I was one of the first taken to see the seer. He was the third parent, and one hidden from us for years. On the day of my 16th, the day I became a man, Demiurge led me with a smile to a large industrial door in the east wing of the temple, usually kept behind a thick curtain. I'd only been gifted glimpses of it until then. I felt so proud as he pulled back the red cloth hanging from a crescent frame and ushered me in. I stood behind him beaming as he took a key hanging from a leather cord around his neck and fumbled it into the lock. It opened with a dull grind, and behind it was another small room, concrete and barely larger than a closet. Demiurge watched me walk inside and close the door behind me. I can remember he put a hand on my shoulder, but I can't remember what he said to me. It was clouded by the shock of what I saw next. Through the final door, we came into a stone wall pit around the size of a small hotel room. Standing with Demiurge on the ledge, I could see that the bottom of the pit before us was covered in a carpet of bugs, beetles, and worms, writhing in liquid motion. Lying among them was a man, the seer. He wore a tight-fitting orange-brown rubber suit that masked every inch of his skin apart from, crucially, his face. I gasped in terror as I saw that the swarms of insects and maggots had picked the rotting flesh clean from his face, leaving a polished white skull. I tried to turn away, but Demiurge held me where I was. He told me that the seer is our only way of communicating with Oz. He's given flashes of knowledge from our Messiah, interrupts them and sends the concise information into the mind of Demiurge, who acts on it accordingly. Demiurge told me that today was the day I'll find out what purpose Oz has for me, what role I will play in his holy war. After that, he stood dangerously close to the edge and looked at the seer intently. After some time, he began to nod. Then he smiled. I didn't know what jealousy was. I felt it from time to time, but the word was never taught to us. It was, however, what the other children must have felt when they saw Demiurge giving special attention to me. In the days after he received the message, as he was preparing to tell me my role, he spent more time with me than he'd ever done before. He let me eat with him, while the rest of the children remained in the granite canteen. I went on a number of walks around the temple with him, even to the higher floors. The further up I went, of course, the more industrial everything became. Stone walls turned to metal, and the lichen that gripped the walls were replaced with corrugated pipes. We'd also stopped just short of the door out, though, and I'm glad. I knew even in my current state I could walk the old world yet. That was a task left to Demiurge. 2 weeks to the day, he took me into his chambers and sat me down. I can remember feeling butterflies in my stomach as he spoke. His words were magic to me. I was so lost in pride I barely realized what he was asking me. This brand, he told me, passing the copper rod that bore the septacle, is power. It is the mark of Oz, and a true honor to bear. It is also the mark of the Legion. We've trained you all well, but I'm afraid we are outnumbered. There is still nothing we can do. We are a speck of resistance compared to the violent might of demonity. His words took up the commanding tempo of a sermon as he spoke. I could not help but be wholly captivated. I rested my chin on a platform of interlocked fingers and listened. We need a veritable army, but our children with their years of practice and knowledge of the scripture are too important to lose. They will fight, of course, and it'll be a great shame once they're lost. But we need... He paused, considering his words. More expendable troops. I looked down at the branding rod, waiting to hear how it was involved with all this. Demiurge seemed to notice my curiosity. He leaned in, put a hand on my thigh, and explained. As I said, the mark of the septacle is powerful. To us, it shows devotion to Oz. To a demon, it shows ownership. Are you saying, I remember squeaking out, enslavement, continued Demiurge. Slay a demon and brand its body, and it will fight for us, for Oz, until its second death. Its true death. This, my son, is what I want you to do. Then came the preparation. To start recruiting for Oz's army, I would need to do the unthinkable and venture out of the temple. This obviously took months of learning about the old world, across countless private tutorage sessions with Demiurge. I learned how the demons, in the unholy inhumanity, not only wiped out mankind, but replaced it. Now they infest the ruinous concrete buildings, generating prana for their gods by engaging in rigorous but meaningless rituals. They disgust me, and I grew to feel nothing but hate. Hate. Shortly before my 18th birthday, we held a small feast for my leaving. I would fulfill the quota of 7 demons killed and enslaved. This command was given to me by Demiurge, but I felt like I could do more, much more. Still, I didn't voice my opinion. We ate with the rest of the children, some older than me, most younger. Demiurge gave a heartfelt speech of the importance of my leaving. There was drink, good food, and laughter. It is now, while I'm writing this down, that I just realized I cannot remember any of the other children. I cannot picture their faces nor think of their names. The more I try to do so, the more the burning headache in my brain grows. These are the people I grew up around, spent my life with. but try as I might, I can't remember them. They're ghosts to me. There was one boy who carved symbols into his thighs with the stolen wire. He showed me once in the washroom. It remained one of the only interactions still somewhat clear in my mind. Shortly after the feast, Demiurge called me to his side and told me that it was time. We walked to the upper floors of the temple as I talked giddily about my coming mission. As we came into the now familiar industrial landscape, Demiurge patted me on the back and handed me a new robe. I stopped and took it with love in my eyes. It was pure black, ideal for staying hidden, Demiurge explained, but the inside was covered with intricate, interconnected white symbols. I stripped then and there and put on my new uniform. It fit perfectly. Demiurge smiled and handed me the equipment I'd need. The branding iron, of course, as well as a dagger. The slightly curved blade was cleaned to reflectiveness, and drawn along it were a series of sigils. Similar icons were carved into the red maple wood handle. Grasping it in my palm, it felt like power. I took both and swanned in adoration forward with Demiurge. He was taking where I'd never been before. The corridor ended in a small rusting ladder. He climbed up, opened a small hatch above him, and crawled out into darkness. Beckoning for me, I did the same. We stood for a moment in darkness, my breath carrying a tinny echo. Demiurge closed the hatch, took my wrist, and led me. With a metallic creak, I was bathed in light. I walked from the newly opened large square door and into a cavernous room. Turning, I saw that what we'd be in was something I'd later find out was called a shipping container. The room had a few more of them scattered around, as well as countless wooden crates and boxes. Demiurge carried on to a small door in the far corner. He opened it. We walked out, and for the first time, I saw the old world. It was beautiful. The sun felt like a mother's touch on my cheek. The grass smelled like bliss. I turned around as I heard the warehouse door shut and lock. Demiurge had left me. Little did I know at the time, I would never see him again. I admit, I was almost struck down with thoughts of never returning to the temple. The old world seemed so inviting, so comforting. I thanked Oz for fighting for it, for my right to one day return in peace. The warehouse stood dilapidated in a long knoll that tumbled down onto a riverbank. A giant iron bridge stretched, connecting either side. Beyond it lay barren a small city, no doubt demon-infested. It was where I'd make my blood pilgrimage, I knew, and started onto the road. Almost immediately, a line of cars came screaming towards me. I hid down behind a metal beam after that, and stayed there until the sun set and the automobiles became wildly less frequent. Then I walked into the city. That first night was hell. I became an overstimulated mess and ended up crying behind a dumpster, too afraid to move lest the begging man slumped across from me, showed his true form, and slaughtered me. At dawn, he left with his hellhound, and I could finally move away. I crawled from alleyway to alleyway, keeping from sight as best as I could. A rotting sign I came across informed me that this nest was known as Detroit. I admit, much of what came next is blurry. I can remember breaking into a hotel and stealing a master key. I can remember collecting a few foot soldiers with my knife and brand. Their screams shocked me. They sounded so human. Worse, their corpses would start weeping once I branded them. After that, I find things become foggy. I know some time hence, while I was sleeping under a bench in a nearby park, a series of cars and vans pulled up around me. The light was blinding, the sirens were deafening, and I was taken away. After that, well, I don't have time to bore you with details. I am currently in a security guard's booth, tapping away at his computer. His blood has nearly reached the door, and will soon start to pour beneath the gap and out onto the halls. I know that is when I will run out of time. I barely have enough left to give you the warning. Please, listen to me. For years, this is the story my carers gave me. The doctors all repeated it to me, and if any humans end up reading this, they will undoubtedly use the justification with you. According to them, I am 38 years old. I grew up in a well-off middle-class family near Ann Arbor. I did great in school and used to work as a freelance web designer. Sometime in 2018, my mother called around to my house shortly before my birthday. She found me unconscious on my bedroom floor with a cloaked man standing over me. He fled through a window and into the woods I lived amongst. My mother called 911 and they took me in for treatment. I had a lethal dose of dimethyltryptamine in me, as well as a small cocktail of other drugs. Worse was the third-degree burn on my lower abdomen, inflicted by a piece of white-hot metal in the shape of a septacle. The following night, I disappeared from my hospital bed. I was found a week later dressed in torn ras and bin bags, cowering under a park bench. I was arrested in connection to a stabbing attack in a hotel. The insanity plea came naturally. I spent my entire time in court ranting and raving about some sort of cult, rambling about getting back to the temple, killing demons, appeasing Oz. I was quickly institutionalized. I've spent years in a psychiatric hospital, according to them, but still often lapse into delusion. I'd gone almost a year without any setbacks, though, and I'd been foolishly entrusted with a plastic ballpoint pen. It was for a journal, but I'd managed to smuggle it back to my cell and scrawl the needed symbols across every inch of the walls. They'd worked, clearly, and I was now free. Sharpened, the hard plastic end worked well as a makeshift knife. I can hear people running down the halls. Please, listen to me. Oz is the only one who will fight for you. Let him